Thank you. Good morning, members, officers, and any members of the public viewing the live stream of this meeting. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. My name is Councillor Michael Atkins. I'm the chair of this committee. My vice chair is Councillor Peter Sandford, and I'll introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. If you're in the chamber, you're reminded that this meeting is being live streamed. Can I ask, if you're joining remotely, ensure that your camera and microphone remain off unless you're addressing the committee. If you're present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. Item 1 on our agenda today is apologies. Aaron, do we have any apologies for absence today?
Thank you very much, Chair. We have no apologies for absence today.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare in relation to items of business on this agenda? If it subsequently becomes apparent later in the meeting, raise it at that point. I'll go to Councillor Sandford, then Leeming, then Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. My usual non-pecuniary interest as a non-remunerated director of South Council Limited, trading as Oman Street Housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. In item 7 in the Treasury report, there is mention of South Cam's loan to Camborne Town Council, and I am a Camborne Town Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeming. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, forgive me. I'd just like to remind the committee that I'm a board member and non-pecuniary interest, a board member of South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership, which has several mentions in the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Stobart. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a member of the Greater Cambridge Partnership Assembly, and obviously their financial transactions are referenced through the accounts.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any more? Thank you. We move to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. We have the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of March in our packs. Are we happy to take those as a true and accurate record, or are there any amendments? Councillor Williams.
It's just on page 5, on the 5th bullet point down. I'm assuming it means extreme weather, as in the weather, rather than weather. So that was the only thing I had, Chair.
Yes, well done. Caught us again. Can we amend that, please? Any more for any more on the minutes? Yeah. No, the scrutiny is much appreciated. Thank you. Right, with that vital amendment, are we happy to take those minutes as a true and accurate record of that meeting for affirmation, please? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 4 on our agenda is public questions. Aaron, are there any public questions today?
Thank you very much, Chair. We have no public questions today.
Thank you. So we move to the first substantive item, which is the annual governance statement and local code of governance, which needs to be approved or is considered in advance of the annual accounts. I'd like to ask Mr. Tully, I think, to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to all members of the committee. So yes, we've got the annual governance statement for 2024 to 2025. Just by way of introduction, the accounts and audit regulations, they require the council to review our governance arrangements on an ongoing basis and prepare a document called the annual governance statement, which is abbreviated as the AGS, and that has to accompany the statement of accounts. It's a great opportunity to communicate how we're complying with our local code of governance, which is also in the report pack. So this is for the 24-25 year, just as a reminder, that's where we're up to with the AGS. We recently approved the 23-24 one, I think, at the January meeting. So we're making very good progress at getting back up to date with that. Things to note, just in the reports, I think looking at sort of page 10, I'd like to highlight that SIPFA have issued some new guidance on preparing an annual governance statement, which is helpful. It applies from the 2025-2026 year, that's the following year, but we are being encouraged to try and adopt it as good practice for this document. It's a good opportunity to sort of road test and learn from that. So we've started to incorporate the guidance in this document. I would say a lot of the guidance is mostly presentational changes. Some things that they've recommended in the guidance we've already adopted over for a number of years. So, for example, our annual governance statement looks forwards as well as backwards with governance-related issues, because it's very much about providing assurance to the readers, the stakeholders that we're considering both. So a lot of things we're already doing. So moving on, I suppose I'd highlight just the usual reporting arrangements. It's worth reflecting that. On page 10, it has to reflect governance matters in the financial year, but also up to the date that the statement of accounts are signed and concluded. So therefore, there could be further changes between now and when that happens. So if there are any further material governance changes, we'll certainly reflect and update those. This has been our approach for actually a number of years now. I think going back to 2019, 2020, it's something we're quite accustomed to. And if there are big changes, we'll definitely keep the committee updated of those. On page 11, just to highlight the status of the document, it is a draft document. It needs to go through the process of being reviewed by colleagues in external audit. So again, that might result in some further commentary or updates to reflect their thoughts on that. Now, the AGS itself is on page 15 to 36 of your agenda packs. We do have it as a separate agenda item to the statement of accounts, although it accompanies them, just because the legislation says we do have to approve it in advance of the statement of accounts. So it starts on page 16, and I won't go through it in detail, but the key things I always like to tease out a bit and make you aware of is on page 20, the roles and responsibilities. It's important to set that out of the council. There have been no fundamental changes since last time. Page 22, we have our sources of assurance, and this is where we also lean upon sources of external assurance, third-party assurance, as we call it, as well. It's positive to see those reflected in there. Page 24, we like to highlight where there have been sort of challenges to governance arrangements. That's a good thing and a healthy thing to reflect that. What I'd say in this document, what we reflected as topical changes include cyber security risk. We very much recognise that as a risk. And also, coming up over the horizon, we've got local government reorganisation. As I said earlier, it's very much in this document about providing assurance that we're preparing for the future as well as dealing with past events. The review of effectiveness looks at what the council has done over the past year through the lenses, the 7 principles of governance, which is our normal approach, and that's got a lot of good content in there. That starts on page 28. And then going on to page 35, we've got our action plan. So this is where we're sort of setting out how we want to improve our governance arrangements over the future. I don't think there's anything too alarming in there, no surprises. It's preparing for local government reorganisation, preparing for new legislation, the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, and also we've got new global internal audit standards, so we're preparing for those as well. And then on page 36, we've got the conclusion, which sort of is a statement to readers that we've got good governance arrangements in place. Then the second document is the Code of Governance. There's a little bit of introductory text in the report itself on page 12, but the local code is on page 37 of your packs. It's a document which is continually reviewed and updated. We try and pick up as much in real time as we can, and then bring back the document to the committee, rather than having it sitting on a shelf being ignored. So we try and bring that back with track changes. You can see those in there. I don't think there's anything too significant in terms of the track changes, but it's good to see how it's being updated, and that's on page 37 of the packs. So in terms of introduction, you know, that's my sort of summary, that the documents are there, we're on target. We published them by the 30th of June. They're draft documents, and the committee invited to review and then approve the documents in advance of the statement of accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tully, for that introduction. I'd like to open it up to any comments or questions from members of the committee, please. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Just 3, I think, quite small points, Chair. Just on page 42, it refers to the controversially changed name of what was the JDCC. And that, I know we sort of, it's not gone down well, but it's actually the Joint Development Management Committee is what I think they finally resolved themselves to be, though that still is open for debate and may change by the time we get to the accounts, no doubt. But that didn't seem quite right. And I thank you for the track changes. That does definitely help us. Also on page 55, it refers to sort of overview and scrutiny. I wasn't quite sure if you were referring to the committee, because again, we like to do things differently sometimes as South Cams. We are scrutiny and overview, rather than overview and scrutiny, which I know is everywhere else. But also, if it's referring to committee, we now have had certain scrutiny functions now delegated to staffing and employment, as opposed to scrutiny. So and we're a governance committee. So it would appear that now governance committees are becoming scrutiny committees, although how that will work out for us, I don't know yet. But I think that's just something, whether that needs to be considered in there. And thirdly, finally, on page 46, we can see there's been a bit of chopping and changing in relation to KPIs. I don't disagree with where it now is, but it does feel that KPIs are also integral for determining the interventions that are necessary. So I think there's something that apply to both categories, not just one. So I'm wondering whether it is appropriate for the sort of removal there, or whether we should keep a reference to it in both sections of the report, because it does feel like an applicable and necessary measure in both cases. Just those three, and appreciating that it may change before the accounts are finished, but please keep the track changes going. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I think I'll move on to further comments. I'm sure Mr. Tully's made a note of those. I think Councillor Redrup, I think you were next, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all the work gone into this. I just have a couple of very minor comments and questions. On page 15 in the covering note of the annual governance statement, it mentions that this is a draft and the final version will be approved by the Civic Affairs Committee. I just wondered if that was the case for us, or if that was more a city thing, or if not, why. And then on page 45, we've got how we define outcomes in terms of environmental benefits, and we mention our zero carbon strategy. I wondered if it was okay to include the doubling nature strategy into this section. I mean, it is all going to change very soon with the climate and nature strategy, but just for now it is two separate strategies on environment. And then on page 52, it made me a bit confused, so I just wanted to raise it, so sorry. It talks about, in point 1, the publication scheme and freedom of information requests, but it kind of looks like it might merge those into one policy on the left-hand side, but they seem to be separate on the right-hand side. So it's just if some little bit of clarity could be made on that. I think that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. That's some really helpful suggestions. Any further comments or questions on this? Councillor Stonebell, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we reflected, sometimes in scrutiny, sometimes elsewhere, on the importance of partnership to the running of the council. And those partnerships take many and various forms. I mean, we dwell quite a lot, and rightly so, on the relationship we enjoy with parish councils. However, the life of the council has many different partnerships. So, for example, in the sustainability functions, if you will, we're just referring to climate and nature. Very often the council's objectives are delivered in partnership with organisations that are active in some sense. It may be local nature recovery groups, it may be charities, and so on. And then in the bigger sense, although they are actually governed by a whole set of, if you will, regulations and agreements, are investment partnerships, and yet they do form a part of the council's business. So I'm wondering how we reflect that range of partnerships in our governance processes, if only in a sense to capture good practice and to ensure that the culture is such that we regard partnerships as both important, but as requiring serious engagement to get the very best from them. So we need to be robust in the way we approach partnerships, but we need to be both fair and just in how they're managed. So thought that where do partnerships feature? How do we capture good practice? How do we make sure we're consistent fair and reasonable in the way we engage. So kind of general question, doesn't need addressing right away, but it's something that kind of emerges from a review of this statement of governance.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stobart. I think that's a really important point. I wonder, kind of in one of these, I'm sure within these principles we can find space to just elaborate a bit more on the kind of growing complexity and range of partnerships that we're engaged in. Yeah, are you happy to take that away, Mr. Tullian?
Absolutely happy to take that away. We reflect partnerships in a couple of different places. I think things will bear in mind what's best placed in the AGS, what is best placed in the Code of Governance, but definitely I agree with you, it's complex, so it's worth a good review. I'm happy to have a look at what good practice is emerging out there and if there's anything we can adopt. But certainly reflects our sort of local arrangements. And with the upcoming challenges and changes which are going to go on, I think it's a great opportunity to revisit that. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, because I think as well as, because it might be tempting just to regard it as a form of kind of stakeholder engagement, but the problem is also that they're being used as delivery mechanisms as well as just as perhaps the sort of more traditional stakeholder activities. So just kind of ensuring that we reflect that, I think, would be important. Thank you, Councillor Stobart. Any further comments or questions on the Councillor Leamy? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question, or one comment, which is just a very small technical thing. It's another typo. So on page 35, in the action plan, in the first paragraph, it talks about further cross-part member steering group. It should be party. It's just a typo. My second point has been sort of alluded to by other questions, but I wanted to fully understand the thinking behind moving the final paragraph on page 46.6. It is essentially moved over from sitting under Principle D to sitting under Principle F, and I just wondered whether you could expand on the reason why it has been moved and expanded in the way it has. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leamy. Yes, I think this is the same question that Councillor Williams had as well on this point. Perhaps a slightly fuller explanation of what the kind of thinking is behind that, and then we can consider what our view is.
Thank you. So simply because there have been recent updates, it was an opportunity to revisit the text, and I think as part of that, it's just a reflection that as there's a performance management section, it was probably fitted better in there. But I mean, I recognise the points you've both made is that certain elements can be cross-cutting and sit in both. So I'm happy to take that away and think about how we can reflect that. Yeah, I'm happy to simply take that away. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, do you want to come back on that, Councillor Leamy?
Yes,
sorry,
associated with this is point 5 on page 50. It does mention that Scrutiny and Overview Committee undertakes constructive challenge to enhance the Council's performance. They also have a role in reviewing the KPIs, and they do that regularly. So I'm just wondering whether that could be added in there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's sorry, Councillor Heather Williams.
Thanks, Chair. Could I have a question, an answer to my question about not just overviews or scrutiny and overview, but also with the changes to include staffing and employment?
Yeah, just making a note of that. So yeah, so in the diagram, it was there is a theme rather than actual reference to the specific committee. I'm happy to take that away and have a think about how we can try and reflect that in the diagram. It's going to be a bit of a challenge perhaps to fit it all in, but we can certainly look and see if that's possible to get that reflected.
Thank you, Chair.
I mean, potentially, calling it, instead of overview and scrutiny, calling it kind of scrutiny activity or something, might, I think getting away from it being so close to the committee name perhaps might just aid the understanding there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Some really constructive feedback. So we are being asked, I think, to approve this document. We have made a number of suggested amendments, and in any case, the document will need to change between now and when it's finally approved anyway. But subject to those amendments, are we happy otherwise with the document as it stands at the moment? I take that by affirmation. Thank you very much indeed. So we come now to item 6 of our agenda, which is the annual accounts for 2024-25. This was provided in the supplementary pack issued just under a week ago. I believe Ms Ahmed is going to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we have worked hard within the team and produced a draft set of accounts which were put on the website on 30th of June. The inspection notice period runs from 30th June to 8th of August, which is 30 working days. We're asking this committee to approve the draft set of accounts. They are draft at this stage because they haven't been audited. There may be a requirement of some amendments post the audit, and we intend on making those changes sort of in one go. If there are any significant amendments, we will report back to this committee. In the main report, I have explained the key core statements and their purposes, and the accounts are presented in Appendix A, and along with that we've provided quite a comprehensive movement and analysis between sort of the current position and last year's balances. HRA and General Fund are showing a balance in the CIES. We have the balance sheet, which has obviously quite a big figure in the property, plant and equipment, which would be as expected due to additional spending in our capital programme, mainly on the new house building programme. Movement in reserve statement is quite comprehensive and does explain our sort of usable and unusable reserves. At this stage, I think that's sort of a summary of the report, and that's all I have to say. There is an Appendix C, which is the KPMG audit plan, but obviously KPMG will explain that when we get to that stage.
Thank you, Ms Ahmed. Yes, I think I'll take comments and questions on the accounts first, if I may, and then I might return to Mr Cardoza and his team to talk about the audit plan, if that's acceptable. Can I just start by saying I think there have been some kind of sort of formatting changes. I think it's been sort of presented in a slightly different style to some of our previous editions, and I find the readability is much enhanced. So thank you. I'm finding it much easier to scan through and understand where I am in the accounts and to internalise the information. So I do appreciate your efforts on that front. Are there any comments or questions on the accounts specifically? Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I have several. Would you like me to sort of do a few and then stop and give a pause?
Sure.
Yeah. So just going through it. On page 11, I'll just give everyone time to get to that point. On point 4, this is about the South Cambridgeshire District Council Business Plan 2019 to 2024, but these are for the accounts 24 to 25. So I'm wondering whether that's, I'm pretty sure we sort of have an annual review and there is a business plan that happens each year. So I'm just wondering if the dates are correct in that section. Page 13, when I look at the line to do with the Chief Executive's budget, and there's quite a difference in the actual outturn to the revised budget. On other cases, it's sort of said that it's entirely due to changes, but not on this one. So I'm just wondering, is it entirely because of the Rural Prosperity Fund grant, or is it that, what sort of percentage is that? Is there anything else that is an example of that? If I then go to page 18, it says about the major repairs reserve. Obviously that's decreased quite a bit. I'm just wondering if it's possible to have sort of a breakdown, a list, appreciate not right now, Chair, but of what repairs have been done, as that is quite a significant gap. And then I will ask this question and then pause, if that's okay, Chair, and then take the other half. The finance spend between 24 and 25 has significantly decreased. So just wondering what sort of commentary we have on that. And you know, that's sometimes a good thing. Sometimes it's not a good thing. So I'd hate for the finance department to be under-resourced, as I'm sure it wouldn't be. But if we can have some clarification, and then that's me at halfway point, I think, Chair.
Thank you. Ms Ahmed, is there any of that you want to take immediately? There may be some of those I think will require slightly more detailed explanation, but if there's anything you want to address now, you're very welcome to.
Yes, so page 11, I understand what you're saying. You're right, there is an annual sort of reference, so we can change that in the final version. In terms of, I think it was page 13, Chief Exec? Yeah. In regards to that, it is due to the Rural Prosperity Fund because it was quite a large amount and there was a classification change of how we dealt with it in the out and how we dealt with it in the accounts. So that is really down to that. In terms of page 18, we'll take that away and come back on that one. And finance expenditure. Oh, finance. If I come back to that one, of course. Are you happy with me?
Sorry, would you mind just clarifying for me again, sorry, where you were looking for the finance spend?
So page 30, it's head of finance. In the expenditure and funding analysis, when we compare the net expenditure from 24 to the net expenditure of 25.
Thank you. Yes, we will
Okay.
provide an explanation for that. Next section.
So next is page 31. We have the breakdown of expenditure of precepts and levies, but in the income, you can't see the precepts and levies. Appreciate it in one of the other categories, but I'm just wondering for sort of transparency whether it would be clearer to have that set aside so then people can sort of see the difference. On page 32, this is about transfer of cash sale proceeds, not in this meeting, but if we can have a sort of list of what assets have been disposed of during this period. I think it's just something, Chair, that as we have LGR coming through, those sorts of things about what we're disposing of, what we're carrying on, are going to come under more scrutiny. So it's a good idea for us to have a view on what has or has not gone. Page 35. It has the parish council precepts. I appreciate that's because in the other section, that's where the county mayoral and PCC and fire and everything else go. But we had asked in previous years for a bit of an explanatory note to go there. So I'm sure it's not the most read document the council produces, but there are people that do want to read this and understand it. And perhaps we should put a note that the other principal authorities, their money is recorded elsewhere, because on initial looking, you would say, okay, that's a parish precept, but where do all the others go? And then people might think actually the district holds it, which I'm sure we would like to hold the budgets of the other authorities, but unfortunately we do not. So that's there. And then on the income and expenditure in relation to investment properties and changes in their fair value, obviously there's quite a big variable on that line as well. And just wondered if there's some extra explanation. There are parts through the report, but we've got that sort of blank right-hand side. I think actually having some notes and commentary when there's large variances, like there are in other parts of the report, would be very helpful there. And then two more, Chair. On page 49, we have the analysis of the income in relation to exit packages. Now, obviously, I appreciate this has to be taken with care, but I think a breakdown of the reasons for those exit packages being necessary is very important. Also, I have previously, when the last accounts came through, we saw an exit package that was above the threshold that should come to full council. We were told there was a reason why it hadn't come to full council, because anything over 100,000 should do. I asked to see the policy, and I've not been given, to my knowledge, that policy. But I think they are the sorts of policies that should be at least a link to it here in the accounts, so that it's really clear when and when not we'll be told. And I think we should have a breakdown as to why. And then lastly, Chair, a bit of scrolling to page 84, which I'll give members time to scroll to. On page 84, in the bottom right-hand box, bless you, it says council short-term borrowing are all now with local authorities and have increased from 42.6 to 46. But if I just look at the Treasury management, the figures are slightly different. It says we're sort of gone from 47.6 to 46. So just wondering if we can have some clarity around the numbers there. That concludes my list at present, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I think there's several there to kind of, obviously to kind of take away and provide more fuller explanations. I'd be a little wary of this being the document to discuss in detail the kind of rationale behind the exit packages. I appreciate you're not suggesting that we include any kind of confidential information, but I'm not sure what we could provide that would be particularly illuminating, but perhaps you'd like to explain a bit further.
If I can, Chair, in sort of other committees, but trying to bring it into, we sort of know if people are voluntary leavers, involuntary leavers, if people have an exit package to take early retirement, those sorts of things. It just gives us a breakdown as to what is, or if it's compensatory. So, you know, it allows us to see if it's the decision of the authority to remove a post, or whether it is, you know, to assist on a voluntary basis. So that information is already reported to some committees and is available, but I just think here it would be good to record it in one place. This year, and this is ongoing, this year the figure hasn't been as high as previous years, but last year we had a situation where somebody was over the reporting threshold for council. It never came to us. As a committee, we didn't, and the problem was, this is great, we're getting the accounts now, but obviously we were getting the accounts later on, so it doesn't allow us to have any scrutiny of those processes. So I think it is important. It doesn't identify anybody, to just have a breakdown. Have we made people, you know, have we done redundancies? Is it a case of sort of sickness, or is it a case of, you know, dissatisfaction and compensation? Those sorts of things I think it's important for us to know.
Thank you. Yes. So I think I'm persuaded that I think it's important for councillors as the kind of members of the authority to have kind of reasonable access to this information. And I think we'll come back to your point about the issue with the one over the threshold in just a minute. I suppose I'm not entirely persuaded that it has relevance in this as a public document in this particular, that it needs that kind of expansion within the annual accounts, but perhaps we can investigate what best practice is kind of across the sector and what level of detail is normally given to the public. I appreciate that councillors deserve to have a kind of full understanding of the situation. It's what we decide to put in our, and kind of what makes sense to put in a set of annual accounts, and whether this is the kind of the best format to explore that issue or not. Do you understand my
I'm sorry, I think Jeff Membry has identified a speaker. I think he's going to tell us it's already in the public domain at somewhere else. What I'm trying to do is bring it to an ease of use document.
Yes. Sorry, I'll bring in Mr. Membry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just thought I'd clarify the arrangements. What has to come to council for agreement is something called special severance arrangements that are over £100,000. Those are things such as if you have a severance agreement with somebody. So all the non-contractual, non-statutory arrangements that cost over £100,000. Now, in those cases, it would be appropriate for members to know the individual concerned, because that would be an appropriate consideration in making the decision. In relation to all the contractual payments, at the moment, we put them together as one lump sum. I think there'd be no potential issue in identifying them in a little bit more detail, as long as we didn't go into the detail of the officers concerned. I'm aware of the case that Councillor Williams is referring to, and that was purely contractual payments. Probably often the biggest cost for a local authority when making people redundant is the pension strain costs that we have to find. Now, those are totally contractual. There's nothing that the council can do to avoid those. So they're not part of the special severance arrangements that were required to report to council. But there's no reason for not saying that there was a case where the costs were a certain amount, as long as the individual wasn't identified. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Membry. Did you want to say anything else on this point before I close this point off?
Yes, I think that's important to just have that commentary, because last time we weren't able to assess that, whereas if you have that breakdown within the accounts of the reasons, not the individuals, then that enables that to be clarified. And I think it is important because it is a use of taxpayers' money being spent in a way which essentially doesn't actually help the end user. So I think explanation is important. Sometimes, you know, these things are sometimes necessary, but we should have that reflected. And as Mr. Membry says, it's not, there's no issues of having that in the public domain. Indeed, it is already in other areas.
Thank you. Ms. Ahmed, are you happy to take that away and think about how we might provide a further layer of detail, shall we say, as to how the public and other interested parties can understand this spend? I'm sensing particularly along the themes of contractual versus non-contractual payments, and to the extent possible, maybe, you know, is it related to termination, retirement, kind of ill health, you know, those kind of buckets that we're sort of broad buckets, but just a kind of layer of understanding. Does that make a degree of sense?
Yeah, I'll take away, but we must remember that obviously the statutory statement of accounts follows a sort of like a prescribed way of we present data, so we wouldn't want to deviate from that too much.
Yes.
So
It may just,
and
yes,
then
it may be a kind of paragraph of commentary with a few numbers sprinkled in it is the kind of, might be a reasonable treatment. Thank you. Are you happy with the other points as well, sorry, that Councillor Heather Williams has raised?
yes, I've noted them down.
For some further investigation, thank you. Was there anything that you were expecting an immediate response to on that list? I think it was mostly, we were looking for breakdowns of particular
I did, there was
particular
some
variances.
clarification that I would have thought we could have in the meeting, Chair, in relation, and the agreement for the notes in relation to the precepts, because that's something that we had agreed previously that we would do.
Thank you. Yes, if we can ensure that there's more clarity throughout, just as to where we're handling the money destined for other authorities versus the parish councils, and how those flows are reflected in the accounts. Because I agree, it is very confusing, because we do obviously bill everyone for all of the money, and we keep some of it and send some off, and then we keep other bits for a bit and then send that off. And yeah, it does, as you'll appreciate, it does kind of pervade through the whole set of accounts. But to the extent that we can give clarity, we probably should. Thank you for that reminder.
And Chair, I appreciate the disposals is something that we'll get following up. But I did raise on page 84 in relation to short-term borrowing and the differences then in the Treasury Management Strategy. So some explanation, I think that's important at this stage before we then go on to debate the Treasury Management Strategy.
Yes. Are you aware of those differences, Ms. Ahmed? Is that a timing difference in terms of when they're drafted between the...
I think we need to take that away and double check those figures.
Okay, we'll come back to you on those, and if there's a disagreement between the two, we'll make sure that the committee is informed as to what the correct numbers are, and make sure that they're correct in the final version.
Could I just because obviously we're going on to debate and have to deal with that report later. Once we've got to the end of this item, if we're able to just give officers sort of 5-10 minutes to find that ahead of then looking at that document, because sort of one affects the other.
Understood. I might well take a short break after this item in any case. We may or may not be able to get a kind of full understanding. My instinct would probably be that the Treasury Management Statement report has probably been written subsequently to when much of the drafting of these accounts was completed. So I'd be inclined to go with that number, but we will consider through the break. Thank you. Thank you. So I think we had Councillor van der Ven, and then I'll come to Councillor Levy.
Thanks. Just a general comment as a very new member of this committee, and it's my first meeting. And I'm thinking about the recent revamping of the council's website and the enormous amount of information that is now more readily available to anyone who's interested in this council and how it sits in the frame of local government. And I was thinking that some of the issues that were just raised might work best on the council website. The general understandings of, for example, parish council precepts and all that picture of where we sit, particularly now with LGR happening, rather than sitting in a document that some people will be interested in, but it really is a very niche document. These are really important matters of public understanding, would suggest that for the purposes of accountability and perception, that it would be better to think about making sure that what we present to the public on our website is really clear and shows where we sit in the scheme of things and gets into some of these questions. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a really, really helpful suggestion. I think we have in the past sort of simply uploaded our set of accounts as we are required to do to our website, but we should think more carefully about what we can put around it to kind of aid kind of understandability and usability. I think that's a very important suggestion. Thank you. Councillor Leeming, I think we were coming to you next.
Oh, hang on. Thank you, Chair. I just have one question, and it's to do with Appendix B. It kind of came at me as a surprise at the end of all the accounts, because it is Appendix B, and it's referred to in paragraph 22 in our report. I wanted to understand whether this was going to sort of remain attached to the accounts, or whether it is an appendices to the written report that covers the accounts. It's a useful thing, but obviously it could change if the figures in the accounts change, and I wonder, just the way it sort of is attached in here is it's a useful thing once you know what it is. I wonder whether we could just have some clarity about whether it will form part of the accounts and when they're finally approved, or whether it's just for our edification as the audit committee at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I understood it as an appendix to the report rather than as the accounts. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right, Chair. That it's an additional appendix to assist members in understanding sort of the differences in the accounts. It does not form part of the accounts. It was to sort of provide a summary. So yes, you're right, the numbers will change, and we perhaps can update that in the final version to make it easier for you. It was just more, rather than writing everything in the main report, to sort of supplement it.
Thank you. So you've sort of covered the point I was going to raise, which is, would we be able to see something similar when the accounts are finalised, just so we have a sure clarity of what the significant movements are. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Leeming. We'll come to Councillor Stobart next, please.
I just would like to endorse that comment on Appendix B, because it is a very useful document. You know, if you're looking for the reason for a significant change, there's a helpful piece of narrative there. And I think, well, it would be my thought that we would both support this and seek to enhance it, not make it huge and spreading, but just to perhaps increase its acuteness as we continue to use it. But I think it's very helpful, and it can be updated, and we welcome track changes in the process of its updating. But I would support this; it's very helpful.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on the accounts? Good. Are we happy to approve this draft set of accounts, appreciating that we're looking for some further kind of explanation as to a number of kind of key and important variances and other changes, but are we otherwise happy to approve this? Sorry, Councillor Leeming.
Just wanted to say, this is the first time we've been on time. Well done, thank you.
Yes, very exciting to be doing this on a hot July day instead of a cold November day. We're delighted we are. So yes, indeed, congratulations are indeed due to the team for their efforts on that. So am I happy? Can I take by affirmation approval of this draft set of accounts? Thank you. So we'll come to the second part of this item then, which is the audit report, which was also provided as part of the supplementary pack. It is the external audit plan and strategy for the year ended 31st of March 2025. Mr. Cardozo, do you want to start introducing this report?
Thank you, Chair. Yep. So yes, indeed, it's fantastic to be here, to be able to have the set of accounts in front of us and yourselves. Great work by the accountants. In terms of, this is our second year. Was hard the first year. I think that was made quite clear. I think we'll talk about it a little bit more in terms of the backstop. But yeah, no, Fazana and Martin, we're having regular calls with both of them as we go through, and we've been working closely in terms of building on from last year and improving the way that we work and looking at the way that we can work better with the council and the information provided. certainly, as you mentioned, that appendix, that does help us as well as a starter for 10. I mean, obviously, we'll be doing much more than that, but in terms of actually looking at what are the big changes, that helps us get a good feel straight away. So that was good. So that confidence that I have then moving into the second year is massively improved in terms of we have a set of accounts that we can look at. We are not waiting for that. We've got the team ready. Jess Townsend, my manager on the audit, with the full team, consistent again with last year. So again, that knowledge that we had from last year continues into this year, which is important in terms of consistency, in terms of the robustness with which we can undertake our work and the challenge that we can provide back to the council to make sure that these accounts, yes, they're great that we've got them on time. Now we need to make sure that they're right. And obviously, in terms of you and the residents and all your stakeholders, that's the important job that we now have. So just going to page 3 of our paper, in terms of the importance of the backstop and the impact, we talked about the impact that it had last year. Obviously, the prior year not being signed off by EY in 22-23 impacted our 23-24 audit, and that continues to impact the 24-25 audit that we're now undertaking. There's a lot of work going on in the background between the government, the NAO, and the department. But notwithstanding that, just on page 3, the significant challenges that we faced in the previous year in terms of the quality of the accounts, the significant delays in responding to us, and the quality of the audit evidence that was then provided to us, all of that's something that we've been working with the accountants on to improve for this year. And we have seen an improvement, and certainly in terms of the planning and risk assessment work that we've undertaken to get you this plan. This plan was issued in April, by the way, just so that you know that it was, again, in accordance with a normal timetable for audit of local government. Unfortunately, you just didn't have an audit committee that fitted into that time scale, but it was issued as a draft. We've continued to work on the value for money risk assessment because that takes a lot of time. I think I explained last year that 70% of our value for money work is about the risk assessment. So again, we take a lot of time to do that. Huge number of papers and policies and controls that we need to look through. Notwithstanding that, the work that we did last year, and again, as I explained last year, huge amount of work that had to go in by all of the council officers to get the information to us. This year, it was about looking at what's changed. So again, in terms of the work that Jess has undertaken in terms of the VFM risk assessment, which she'll talk to you about in terms of the update, while it's not in this plan, we have more or less completed that, and we will be able to report that back to yourselves very soon. Just onto the next page. Page 4 of our plan, again, the materiality. We talked through materiality last year. We have a group materiality and we have a materiality for the council. 1.4 million for the council, a lot of money, 1.5% of expenditure. That is still low from our point of view. We still consider that there's still some risk in terms of undertaking the audit of this council and the numbers, so we've kept that low. But in terms of the reporting back to yourselves, anything over 46,000 or thereabouts, we will report back to you, any change. So again, whilst 1.5 million is a lot, 1.5% is low, but 46,000, that's a low number to report back to you, and everything over that, in terms of anything that changes in the accounts, we will report back to you. We do look at the work of internal audit, as you'd expect and want. We can't rely on it, unfortunately, because that's just the nature of external audit work, the way that it's gone. And if we did place any reliance, I'd have to redo everything that Jonathan and his team have done, so there's no need. But it does give us good pointers. It does give us ideas of where the controls are working or not working and where we can direct our resources. We do use our real estate valuation Centre of Excellence team, which are made up of valuers, qualified RICS valuers, and we use our Pension Centre of Excellence, again, give large numbers in terms of valuation, large numbers in terms of pensions. And again, we've got actuaries and pension auditors that we use as part of this team, and they form part of our audit, and they sit with us in the offices and stuff, so it's good. It's a good way to make sure that it's not us that are providing you with that assurance, but actual specialists. The significant risks, not a massive change from last year when we talked to you about these. So valuation of land and buildings, valuation of investment properties. Again, as I said, we use our valuation experts to help us with that and look at Wilkes, Head and Eve, and the valuations that they've provided back to you. We look at the information you've provided to them to be able to get through a good valuation. We did have some issues last year, but again, as part of that, we've started earlier. We've got the involvement of our specialists earlier, so again, we should be able to go through that much better this year. Management override controls, something that's in every single audit plan for every single organisation that's audited by any auditor. And we're looking at the kind of estimates and the judgments that your officers and definitely people like Fazana and Martin are using to compile the accounts. Again, that's part of the work that we have to do. Post-retirement benefit obligations, so again, the LGPS and what you have in terms of pension liabilities or assets. Again, as I said, our Pension Centre of Excellence will look at all of that for us and report back. We've engaged with them early, so again, there shouldn't be any issues in terms of lateness of work coming back from different teams within KPMG. So that will help us deliver our audit. Expenditure recognition, as always, again, looking at the risk that you have of recognising the right expenditure in the right place at the right time. Other risks that we've put in here, what is about the preparation of group accounts? We had a number of issues with that last year. Again, we've worked through that. We've worked with the accountants and we've talked through the issues that we had. So I'm feeling more confident, but regardless, we will still do a robust audit of that and make sure that it's correct. Adoption of IFRS 16, again, we didn't have the information that we wanted first off, so we've put it in as another risk. And then the recoverability of investments, which we talked about at length at the end of last year in terms of my ISA 260 to yourselves. So not you, but you, hopefully you've been able to look at the report from last year. Value for money, do you want to just give a brief update, Jess?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So just to provide a verbal update, so as Andy said, at the time that we drafted our plan in April, we'd only just started this piece of work, so it didn't seem right to include this in our report as this is currently underway. But we have probably done 95% of it, so we're just waiting on a couple of bits, and I've been working closely with Fazana and the rest of the team to get that information through. We've asked to have it by the end of this month, just to make sure that we're completing this before we're due to start our final audit, which is commencing on the 4th of August, off the top of my head. So yeah, we're in a good position, and currently we have the same risk that we identified in the prior year, so over the preparation of the group accounts and then also the recoverability of the investments. But happy to take any questions on our plan. Thank you, Chair.
Just before we go to that, sorry, Chair, just in terms of a couple more points, just to quickly make. The fees, we talked about that at length last year. They are a lot, and they obviously increased a lot from your previous auditors in terms of the scale fee. I'm not sure what your previous auditors charged in terms of overruns, because I think that's still under discussion. We charge a lot in terms of overruns, and I know, Councillor, you had an issue with that in terms of how do we make sure that that's not a consistent thing and a consistent theme. I did explain at the time, and I do mean this, and Jess, I'm sure will back me up, we don't want to spend that time. We've got other audits that we need to carry on with. We've got a limited and finite number of people that we have within audit. We would rather get the audit done on time to the timescales that we've planned with the accountants and the promises that we make within this plan in terms of the timescale. So I'm hoping that 180, we're not going to have to increase that. That's what my plan is. Jess, in terms of the team that we have planned, and we've done the planning and risk assessment, we've done the planning and risk assessment in terms of value for money, so we're on target. We've got the team booked in. As I said, there's consistency in terms of knowledge and experience, and certainly having somebody as good as Jess working on your audit, you are very lucky, which is fantastic. So in terms of actually making sure that we report by the end of September, that is our plan. You do have a disclaimed audit opinion potentially, and that's the issue that we have, because all the discussions that are happening at the centre is that we could work our way through and make sure that you don't have a disclaimed audit opinion. However, that does include a huge amount of work by us. That virtually is looking at redoing work that was not done by your previous auditors. That does mean that there is a huge cost implication to that. So there's the cost of benefit analysis that you have to make, Fazana has to make in terms of the amount of work that her accountants and herself has to put in to give us that information that we could then do that. We would not try to do that before the end of September. We are focused on the 24-25 audit and doing as much of the accounts audit work of the accounts in front of us rather than the years previous. That said, there is a discussion to be had then, post-September, and us, Jess, negotiating with other managers and other partners and directors in terms of stealing staff and making sure that we can do that. But that's a central discussion that's happening with partners above us. They're having those discussions about whether or not it can be done and where it can be done realistically. There's a council not far from here that I audit that was only had 1 year of disclaimed opinion. It only had a couple of things that we couldn't audit last year. So again, I could catch up with that relatively easily and they could have a clean opinion. Here it's a bit different, to say the least. You know the issues, you know what was not audited by EY in previous years. Don't need to go through that, but there's a lot of extra work would have to be done here. So again, in terms of how much we could put into that and how much you think that's valuable, that's a discussion to be had. And then the final thing, just from me, with some sadness, but also with a lot of glee, I will be retiring in September from KPMG after a long, long time, longer than Jessica's alive, actually. But the replacement, I wanted to make that announcement. When I talked to Fazana, I wanted to make sure I talked to Fazana with the replacement in place. So Emma Larkham will be your replacing director, hopefully soon to be partner. And she works on the Cambridgeshire County Council audit. She lives in Cambridge as well. So again, in terms of like local person auditing you, understanding you, thinking about LGR and all the other issues that you have. She was part of the local government technical team in terms of us putting together the bid to work on this. She's part of the lead coordinator on a national level for all local governments. So in terms of a replacement, she's a phenomenal replacement. You'll really be able to gain a lot from her experience and her ability to work with you on a pragmatic basis and work with the team who you all know. I mean, Jess and the whole team know Emma, so it's not an issue there whatsoever. I just thought I'd just let you know. But I'll work right to the end, as KPMG will make sure I do. Thank you. Happy to take questions, as Jess said.
Thank you, Mr. Cardoza. Mr. Townsend. I think I'm going to need to split this into a number of themes, otherwise I think we're going to kind of jump around between lots of things. Obviously, it goes without saying we wish you all the best for your retirement, but there should probably be some discussion about how we transition. So I think as the first theme, if there are, I think I'll start by taking any comments or questions on the audit plan itself, so the identification of the risks, the sort of potential significant weaknesses, whether we think KPMG have got are in the right kind of ballpark with those, materiality, those sets of issues. I might then move on to any questions around the fees and the fee structure. And then I think I will open up around the timetable and the kind of the sequencing. And then, yes, perhaps finally on kind of personnel rotation, new people, etc., etc. Does that sound like a reasonable way forward? Do those themes kind of make sense? So to start with, are there any comments or questions on the kind of meat of the audit plan, so identification of weaknesses, risks, materiality, etc.? I'll start with Councillor Stobart and I'll come to you, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So you'll have to forgive me if I've overlooked this before, but IFRS 16, which, as I understand, is dealing with how the council handles and values leases, crops up as a more significant risk. And I think there's a reference to the council being slow in the implementation. So, I really wanted to ask what it is we can do and we should be doing to actually reduce this risk, to engage with the auditors. Is it a resource question? What are the barriers here making it difficult, or what barriers might we lower to actually deliver the kind of information that's needed?
Thank you, Councillor Stobart. Should I start? I might start with Mr. Cardoza just to elaborate a little more. I might come to you, Ms. Ahmed, if you have any thoughts on the Council's approach to the issue of leases.
Sure. So IFRS 16 is new, which is probably why it's not been on the radar. But in terms of the leases, you're correct. It is about the valuation of the leases and the disclosure of what the impact on the council's finances is. The information that we required in terms of the build-up to IFRS 16 and the kind of compilation of the information to tell us what the potential impact will be wasn't there on the council. Obviously, you were focused on delivering the previous year's audit accounts for us to be able to audit, working with the previous auditors as well, trying to get those previous accounts completed and stuff. So this wasn't high up on the priority list. We can catch up. This has been done by a number of local authorities across the country now, so you're not having to start from a blank piece of paper. You know what other councils have done. We've talked about putting together the register for leases and liabilities from and assets, again, which you might as well do while you're doing that anyway. So once you've compiled that, once you've actually compiled the paper that supports the disclosure that will have to go into your accounts in terms of IFRS 16, then we can look at that. But I don't know if we've got any more update from, no. So again, I'm happy to hand over to Fazana and the team to tell you in terms of their position.
Thank you. Ms. Ahmed, is there anything you would like to add on this issue?
Yeah, so in terms of what KPMG say, that's correct. Previously, due to the backlog of accounts, we haven't had the capacity to do so, but IFRS 16 has come into place, and we have done extensive work as much as we could have, and so that's where we are. And we have had meetings with other authorities, and we all seem to be in similar boats, just due to the capacity and backlog accounts. And there is a lot of work entailed in it. It's not just about identification of leases, it's then looking sort of more into the detail of the paperwork to really identify that. And finance necessarily doesn't hold that information. It is by liaising with other service departments. So I'm pleased to say we have done quite a bit of work on this and the background into this.
Thank you for that update. Is there anything else, sorry, Councillor Stobart?
No, it seems appropriate actions are being taken, but
Yes.
it would be helpful probably to keep an eye on this to see
I
that
agree.
good progress
Yes.
is being made.
I think, and particularly when it falls into that bucket of information being held outside the finance team, that's something that has kind of tripped us up in the past with other elements of audit and accounts work. So, yes, I think a close eye on that. I'll come to you now, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. First of all, the first 2 points, valuation of land and buildings, valuation of investment property. Just wondering if you could give a sort of percentage of your time that we spent on that, because the obsession of external audits, or I know it's not your particular preference, but on fixed asset registers or things that actually have no material cash reality, they are numbers that could change at any time. A balance sheet is so frustrating. And yet when we sort of look at the planned response, there's so much compared to some of the other areas. So just some reassurance that, you know, we aren't going to be sort of redoing the same work as previous, and it just seems never ending. The fixed asset register is where we got into problems in the first place. And yet it has absolutely no impact on residents. It's frustrating to say the least. So that's my first point. I will have a comment when it comes to fees, as I'm sure you would expect from me, but I'll save that bit, Chair. The only other thing, if I can just take us back to the accounts on page 13, if we could just pop back that, but it is a question for external audit, I assure you, Chair. We can see that there's quite a big variance between our budgeted, if you look at the outturn position to the general fund, there was a rather large difference. I think it was about 3 million. But what concerned me a bit on this was sort of our provisional report. It all seemed so out of kilter, and it was almost like a big shock at the end. So I'm wondering, in the actions that you're proposing, will it look at sort of how we're calculating those budgets to see if we don't, because that's a significant amount of sum that could send a bit of a shock to the system if it's not available going forward. And over time, I'm sure we'll see how that will have to be budgeted around and revised. But is this something that you think you will pick up as to how this came about through your work, or is it something that we need to ask sort of our internal audit or ask for another area to look into? Because I say 3 million difference is a huge figure for an authority like ourselves to cover.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'll pick that final comment up before I come back to the valuation. So yes, I mean, the comparison of outturn to budget is key to us understanding the council and the kind of controls that you have in place, especially about financial sustainability. So as part of our value for money assessment, the three key areas: financial sustainability, governance, and then the three E's. So financial sustainability is about how do you use your medium-term financial plan, how do you understand where you're going to be, how do you predict the future, how do you forecast, and how good is that, and how good is it is always iterative, it is always about ratcheting each time something changes and you revise your budget and you get, you have to understand why that's changed, so that the next time you put the budget together it's a bit better. It's no different in KPMG, as Jess knows, in terms of when I put a budget together and my partner says, well, how come you're so far away from the hours that you said you were going to deliver? But that said, in terms of the actions that can be done, we will only comment on the arrangements and whether they or not they work. We will have ideas about how you could improve it from, and it's again from general practice, looking at best practice, looking at other councils, and we will make those recommendations if they're appropriate, Councillor. Equally, from Fazana's point of view, I can guarantee you she was not happy in terms of being that far away from it, and in terms of what the actions planned by officers to mitigate that going forward and to fix it in terms of actually making sure that that kind of variance, which is a larger variance for a council your size, isn't something that is sustainable going forward, so that has to be fixed. If I just pick up quickly on that, and then Fazana, if you want to pick up on that. But in terms of evaluations, yes, that's a frustration to us in terms of the amount of work that we have to do. We cannot get away from it. If I didn't do the work and Jess didn't do the work, the AQR, which is our regulator, will come down on us on a ton of bricks, and they have in previous audits where people have tried to be sensible and pragmatic and done a little bit less, but they've said, well, the statute says, the regulation says, why haven't you? So we have to spend a lot of time. They are large numbers. As you say, they don't impact because of the way the local government works, but certainly in other sectors, it is a key number in the accounts. There is a lot of money that you spend in terms of your land and buildings. There is a lot of money that you spend in terms of property investments, and you have to make sure that it is valued properly so that the decisions that you make as councillors and as a council and as officers, you are making the right decisions based on the right figures. And the only way we can do that is a lot of work.
Thank you. Yes, well, there has been, I understand, some kind of national discussion, I think particularly around looking at kind of pension liabilities in local government and the amount of time that's spent kind of assessing that. But as I understand it, there haven't been any changes as yet to either the kind of auditing standards or the kind of legislative level to kind of get you off the hook for redoing that work. That's my favourite bugbear of all of them. But there we go. Ms. Hammond, did you want to comment at all on the budget and outturn before I move on to further comments?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the outturn, we have to produce this quite early, so we have to draw the line somewhere. This year for 24-25, we produced the outturn 2 weeks earlier than we did for 23-24. It does mean that when you draw the line, sometimes things come out of the woodworks after, and that's why it's called provisional outturn. It is disappointing to know that sometimes the provisional and the actual isn't quite as aligned as you would have hoped, but it is sometimes because something has come out of the woodworks while we're producing the statement of accounts and not necessarily an issue as such.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on, I say, the kind of meat and potatoes of the audit plan? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about point 3, management override of controls. When you were giving your narrative, you said that this is a standard thing that's in every audit report. It's a consistent risk across all organisations. You have made some comments in your response, and I recall from the previous year's accounts you raised some control recommendations. I wondered whether you'd seen evidence that these things have been implemented and that the risk had reduced, or will that be? Is that something that you will that you will understand more as you get deeper into the audit? Thank you.
Oh, good memory from last year. And yes, certainly in terms of, the controls that have to be improved in terms of, for example, journals and or estimates, and the recommendations that we made, we haven't followed that through yet. We will as part of the audit. I think the conversations that we've had and the conversations that we had when we made the recommendation, it seemed quite understandable to me that the officers were going to take some time to think about it, make sure that the improvements that they made were realistic and deliverable. Those conversations were frank, and I believe that they were going to make those improvements. So I have there's no uneasiness from my part in terms of whether or not officers were committed to making that improvement. In terms of the work that maybe internal audit have done as well, in terms of seeing the improvements across the controls environment and the journals and the way that officers are using their judgment, is something, again, that you will probably see in terms of the work that comes back, but I'm not making any commitments for Jonathan and his team.
Thank you. Councillor van der Ven?
Thanks. Apologies for a newbie question. I'm curious, in the FRC areas of focus, the expectations and the context that's set out here, given that there are things like geopolitical tensions and climate, what about local government reorganisation, which I appreciate isn't, it's still ahead of us, but it's a huge part of planning, and it's identified in many contexts as a risk. And given that it is a broad change, a national change, why is it not included, unless I've missed it? Thanks.
No, you haven't missed it. It was a conscious decision this year in the 24-25 for councils where we weren't seeing a specific LGR reorganisation to not put anything in our plans. As this is a draft plan now, so if things move quicker, we will absolutely make sure that we take that into account. The fact that we all audit Cambridgeshire County Council as well gives us that ability to make sure that we're picking up both sides. I think I mentioned previously, before you joined, that I was the auditor to Derbyshire and Derby City when they split. Also, the auditor to Northamptonshire County, and one of the reasons that they had to be disbanded was the work that we did. The work of local government reorganisation is still in flux in terms of understanding, in terms of how does that impact the audit. I didn't want to bring in hypothetical, theoretical risks into the plan. These are real risks that are here, the significant risks that we've identified, and the other audit risks for your 24-25 audit. I think going forward, which won't be mine, with Jess and Emma looking at that going into 25-26 and 26-27 more likely, that will absolutely form part of their risk assessment and work with you as a council and the accountants and everything else that you're going through in terms of how do you make sure that you're prepared, that the leases and assets register for an example. That was one of the key things that Derbyshire and Derby City fell out about, because nobody understood who owned what, and everyone was arguing about that to the last day, and probably still arguing about it now, 10 years later. But that will form part of future plans, not this plan.
Thank you for that clarification. Good to know that's kind of obviously on your radar. I'm minded, I think I'll move us on to fees now, if that's okay, and then we'll come to timetable after that. Are there any comments or questions on the fees? I'll come to Councillor Williams, and I'll come to Councillor Stonebart.
Thank you. So on the fees, from what you said earlier, I like the way that you sort of gave that assurance that we don't want to do more, and then I said, oh, by the way, I'm retiring. So the questions that goes, I warn you, my dad retired at Christmas. He's never been busier. But we do wish you a nice retirement. Obviously, we had a lot on the PY fee, and then what you were saying about earlier on the fact that we haven't got accounts that have been audited previously. So I was assuming the opening balances is sort of where the big issues are going to lie, more than the accounts themselves. Is there anything at all at the moment that you foresee me being unhappy? Because it is my dream that the statutory audit fee and that total figure are the same. I actually agree that your basic fee is high. EY, they got the work by bidding incredibly low, in my view, and that was always going to lead to them having to make their money up elsewhere. That was my interpretation, so I was very grumpy with them. That will be of no shock to this committee. Yourselves have taken a different approach, which I respect. But that does mean equally that I get a little bit jittery when I see 133,000 overspend on PY fee variations. So anything at the moment, cards on the table, because I've got to manage my expectations now of those figures balancing, as I hope they will do when we get to the end of the audit.
Just to intervene quickly, of course, I mean, you have already included a line for IFRS 16 adoption, which I suppose is not included within the kind of scale fee. So there is one known card there, although do you have any sense of the likely scale of what we're talking about for that in addition?
Work with a 10% buffer, Chair.
All right.
Maybe. And then get it down.
I can give you an estimate from, because we've, the NHS audits that we do are kind of a year ahead of local government in terms of adoption of IFRS 16. So I've charged a large NHS trust about £10,000 for undertaking the IFRS 16 work. I can't imagine you'll be far off from that. You're slightly more complex than a simple trust, even if it's large. So yeah, we're looking at about that. So less than 10%. Sounds good. In terms of the prior year, when we break down the fees, we'd already by this time overspent, and we were overspending in terms of the planning and risk assessment, how much more that had taken. I think that was about £50,000 at that point when I came and talked to you in terms of just our planning work that had taken longer for lots of reasons. At this point in time, without putting words into Jess's mouth, we've undertaken our work in the timetable for the fee that we allocated to it. That tells you instantly we're not talking about £50,000 overrun already. That was already accumulated in the prior year audit. Are you sending, making a note to yourself? Right. So again, that's okay. Just a calculator. But yeah, so that's instantly excellent from my point of view. We've worked well with the accountants. We've done the planning and risk assessment work within the budget that we had for the fee that we quoted. For us, that's a win as well, and I promise you that's a win, because that means that Jess can work on other audits, and she's not getting shouted at by her other partners and directors. Her team are working well and are not stressed in terms of trying to get information that we couldn't get, and Jess is asking them why they haven't, and then I'm asking Jess. So the whole team is more confident in terms of what it understands and how to get the information. I'm more comfortable in terms of when I look at the file and I look at where we are, that we will get the work done within the timetable for the fee that we've quoted. So again, whilst I can't make any promises because I am still an auditor and there's still always caveats, to date, the position that we're in is that we're not looking at an overrun. And that's got to be a brilliant position to be compared to where you were. To be able to, there will be additional fees for IFRS 16, etc. But to be able to get to that from a position where when we first took over the audit, you're looking at 9 years outstanding, you're looking at EY saying that, there was lots of issues and stuff. For us to get to a place where we can actually look at the accountants in the eyes and be confident that they're producing what we require is a great place to be. To move so quickly is fantastic as well. Yeah.
Thank you for that overview and for some of those specifics. That we do really appreciate that. I'll come to Councillor Stobart, if that's okay.
So, Chair, thank you. Now, as I understand, when Mr. Cardoza was talking about fees, there was an option there to look at perhaps certain of the council activity with a view to accelerating the exit from the disclaimed regime. Now, sometimes when you have people on site, it's a very good opportunity to do a little bit of extra work. It can come at a lower marginal cost. So my perhaps rather naive question is, are there any work packages wrapped up or that could be identified that would accelerate that exit from the disclaimed regime in a way that's beneficial to the council, where the fee attributable would be worth spending in a very loose way?
Yes, thank you very much for the reminder, Councillor Stobart. I should have had the exit from the disclaimer as a separate theme as well. So I might move on, unless there's any other comments on fees, although I think we've had quite a good discussion about that. I might move on to this issue of that Mr. Cardoza raised of the kind of the exit from the disclaimer. I think important first of all to say that my understanding would be that this would be a management decision, i.e. I imagine it would be a decision of Cabinet as to whether or not to kind of commission what would essentially be kind of further work from KPMG to achieve a different outcome in terms of disclaimed opinions. Now I'm going to set out how I think I understand it, and I'm going to look at Ms. Cardoza and you're going to tell me if I got it right or not. So, for every set of accounts, you're affected not only obviously by the activity in that year, you're affected by the activity in the previous year because there are prior year comparisons, and you're also affected by the year before that because some of the brought forward figures have comparators the year back. So really you're kind of looking across 3 years in each kind of set of accounts, as I understand it. So as we sit here now, we've got the accounts that we're effectively looking at now, which are the 24-25 accounts, where work is apparently progressing well. We're referencing back 1 year to the accounts for 23-24, which were disclaimed, but after, I'm going to say, 75-80% of the work, is that a kind of fair? So sort of 75-80% of the work was kind of completed on those accounts. But due to timing issues and the fact that it was going to have to be disclaimed anyway, those have been disclaimed. The year before that was the final year under Ernst & Young, or EY, sorry, I suppose they're probably called now. So there, I don't want to say 0%, but a very, very small percent of work was carried out on that account. So the kind of the 2 year prior is where we've got the least assurance. We've got about kind of 75-80% assurance on the prior year, and hopefully we'll get 100% assurance, at least on the in-year activity for the current year. So then I guess in order for the accounts for this year to avoid having any kind of disclaimer, that would probably be an infeasible amount of work to go back and redo the 2 year prior, as it were, to redo everything for Ernst & Young. That doesn't seem to me to be feasible or desirable when we haven't even had 1 year sort of fully done correctly as it kind of should be. So my sense from that is that a disclaimer for the accounts we're looking at now is probably inevitable, at least in terms of the 2 year prior. So that final Ernst & Young year, I think EY year, I think we probably have to say, full assurance will never be achieved over those figures. It's already 2 years back in the rearview mirror, and very little work has been done, aside from the value for money work, which was completed. No substantive work, I think, has been completed on those. So unless anyone wants to tell me that we should spend an inordinate amount of time and money and probably put this year's audit at risk, I think that's probably not feasible. So for me, I think the question is whether it's worth that kind of 25% that was not complete in the previous year's figures, whether that is worth doing, whether it's worth doing now, kind of in a package, or whether it's worth leaving or coming back to it at a later date. I mean, I'd be interested to know kind of your reflections, both as a committee and as auditors and as accountants, whether we want to provide Cabinet with a steer. Because I think, unless somebody wants to tell me otherwise, my sense would be this would be a management Cabinet decision, whether to kind of reopen these kind of prior years. Sorry, I spoke for quite a long time there. Perhaps, Mr. Cardoza, did you want to just correct anything I said that was incorrect?
No, that was a really good summary, actually. I'm going to use that going forward. But thank you for that. No, it was a very accurate summary. And in terms of the 75%, that's about right in terms of last year, 23-24, in terms of catching up. What we will do in this year, because we're on time, because we've got better working papers, because we've got a better ability to undertake our work with consistent staff, etc., we will be able to catch up quite a lot of that 75%, from the 75 to the more towards the 95%, because we will do the valuation work, because we will do the work that we just did run out of time, literally ran out of time. We're on time scale, we've got the auditors, we won't run out of time. If we get the work done, the majority of our work done by the end of September, the unfortunate piece is that Emma still won't be able to sign your opinion until the end of February 26. So theoretically, there's still time between when we complete our on-site, when we will have people on site as well, which is always better in terms of the actual, our auditors being on site with your accountants and being able to sit next to people and work through things. So we'll get our work done more efficiently, more effectively, and more robustly in terms of the actual challenge. But we will have time to do more, and we have budgeted to do more than we did last year in terms of, at no extra cost, at the cost of the audit, to actually have the auditors work through much more and get through much more. So we will actually catch up quite a lot of the work that wasn't done last year. We will do this year. So when you read through the information that's been issued by central government in terms of the LARIGs 5 and 6, and that talks about how you catch up in terms of the backstop, there's a lot of reading there. There's a lot of things that are changing on a quite a regular basis. The options there take you slightly away from a totally disclaimed opinion, which is what I had to do last year in terms of carried out all of the work. We worked really well with the accountants in the end and actually got to a place where we could sign the opinion, albeit disclaimed, which basically said we disclaim all of this. You'll get to a place where we're not disclaiming that much, and maybe, again, I can't put words into Emma or Jess's mouths, but maybe it won't have to be a full disclaimer, but maybe it could be an except for, maybe it could be an opinion that says we have audited all of this, and it's just these 3 or 4 things that have not been audited. How much better is that for you as a council? How much better is that for your residents? And how much better is that for the stakeholders who are looking at Cambridgeshire and all of Cambridgeshire, and then looking at South Cambridgeshire within that and saying whether or not you've spent your money the way that you said you had? And some of the independent KPMG looking at it from the outside, going through your books and making sure that that report is correct, that will provide 10 times more assurance than obviously EY, which provided no assurance, sadly, but even more than the assurance that we were able to provide, I was able to provide last year. So that is a better position. I would, just sitting here from a value for money point of view as a potential, as a council tax payer in Solihull, would I recommend that you go all the way back 3-4 years to make sure that all of that is correct? No, just wouldn't. I don't think that's a useful use of your finite resources or ours, or the money that you have to spend. I don't think I'll get in trouble with my boss, would I, Sarah? Yeah, but no, I think Sarah would be just as pragmatic and practical about it and be realistic about what you want to achieve. If you're able to provide assurance back that 95% of those accounts are right except for these because of prior year issues, that's a good place to be.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think if we can limit the qualification, I mean, if we can set a target of limiting the qualification to the two-year prior, the kind of T-2 year, if we can say that we're happy with the activity this year, the ending balances, the balances brought forward in the few, because it is only even a few places in the accounts where there are brought forwards, as it were. If we can limit the qualification to that, then I think, well, I mean, that would clearly be better than we've achieved for a number of years. And as you say, it would then be a disproportionate amount of work to kind of completely eradicate the qualification up to that point. And I think then that would set us up to issue a clean set of accounts, potentially a clean audit opinion, caveat, for the year after that. There would then be no kind of lingering. Yes. Yes. Oh, sorry. There we are. So, are there any further comments or questions on the on this issue of kind of doing additional kind of further work to limit the qualifications on the audit opinion? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of this being pragmatic is to do with timing and progress with this year's audit, about whether there is capacity, whether your team will actually have capacity to pick this up as time goes through. So, if I understand what we've said correctly, these 24-25 year accounts will have to have some form of disclaimer because of the prior years, and we're speaking about whether it's a full disclaimer or an except for report. The aim with that would be that the 25-26 accounts were much cleaner because the two predominant factors in them would have had a good quality audit. My decision about whether it would be a good thing to do would depend on how much time you have. And I know you can't answer that right now because you're at the start. When would we next be able to discuss this as a committee?
That's a very good question. Your team will be on site, I believe, is it sort of August and September, if I understood that correctly? I think we're due to meet in September, and I want to say date of the next meeting. I should know off the top of my head, but I'm afraid I don't. Yes, in September. So it may be that in September we can have another check-in. We can assess the progress, because I think the first priority has to be obviously that the audit for this year is a success, and that we don't threaten the kind of functioning of the team either at your end or at our end in terms of getting through the transactions and the closing balances for this year. Whether then the vista opens up a little and we can, as you say, kind of fill in that kind of 25% from the previous year, or at least 20 of that 25% as may be. So yes, I think that's a useful discussion to have had now, and then I think we discuss further in September, unless anyone wants to suggest that that's now for the Are we happy with that on a kind of officer side as well? Fantastic. Can I just move this on just to the issue of the timetable, because I think you've made reference to the fact that even if the work is completed in sort of August, September, October time, you'd look for partner sign-off in February. Would you mind just expanding on that a little, and so the committee can understand the situation?
Yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing, but we will have completed our work substantially by the end of September, because that's when we've got all of our staff booked in. Going into October, if there's anything particularly that causes an issue, then we might have to work into October. By the end of December, we'll have finished everything. We want to finish at the end of September so that your accountants can get on with what's important to them and what's important to the council in terms of budgeting, so that we get back into a normal timetable. It also, from a selfish point of view, works for us as KPMG, because that's the window for local government audit. Then we have housing, then we have education, then we have health, then we have local government, then we have central government, then we have... So it all fits in, and if something slips, then everything starts to spiral and lots of shouting happens within KPMG. So we want to stick to that end of September deadline, because it's good for you, because we've got the right auditors doing the right work, rather than bringing in auditors who don't know you, who don't know local government, because our auditors have gone on to work on something else. So that's it. So we will do the substantive audit and get all of it done, speaking for Jess now, by the end of September. The way that the wording is within the LARIGs that the government has issued in terms, and the ministry has issued, in terms of when I or my Emma can sign off, gives us the backstop of February 26. We thought they would bring that forward. For some reason, they've left it at February, it was February 25 for this year, for the previous year. We thought they'd bring that forward. The fact that they haven't brought it forward means that if I or Emma sign off an opinion at the end of September, somebody within government or somebody else could ask the question, well, why haven't you continued auditing from the end of September right through to the end of February? Because you've got the time, the deadline is the February 26th, and you could have undone the potential disclaimer. So why haven't you spent all that time? Logically, that doesn't make sense to me, because we've done all the work that we can in 24-25. We could have the resources, as I said. We could put those resources in. You'd have to put the resources in. We'd have to charge you lots more money for doing that. But somebody could ask that question. The fact that that question can be asked, the partners within KPMG, and certainly the risk partners within KPMG, last year said to us, because on a number of audits, I could have signed before the end of February 25. I couldn't here, but I could have at other places. And I was not allowed to by the risk partners, because they said if somebody challenges us, then we can't demonstrate that we went all the way through and used all of our resources, because it talks about best endeavours. That's such a woolly term for a bunch of auditors and accountants that our risk partners wouldn't risk it. So they physically prevented us from signing, and they will physically prevent us from signing again before the end of February 26. But that, from my point of view, that's just fine. It is what it is. But we won't be stepping on the toes of the accountants. We won't be coming back and doing extra work between the end of September, unless we have to, between the end of September and February.
Thank you for that explanation. Do you know, is this the approach being taken across the sector? Is this decision being taken firm by firm? What's the kind of landscape on this issue?
It varies between firms, but no firm signed before the end of February 25, and unless it was a clean opinion like I had at Telford. So at Telford and Wrekin Council, which had a clean opinion from their previous auditors, we undertook the work and I was able to sign off, and that was fine. Where we had a disclaimed opinion nationally across all firms, no one signed before the end of February 25.
Okay, Thank you for that explanation. I think obviously, our concern obviously would be around the temptation then for things to kind of sort of spiral on beyond the end of the kind of substantive work. I mean, I think you've outlined why that would not be sort of favourable from your firm's perspective in any case. But I guess that's something for us at the very least to kind of keep an eye on in terms of as we move past the substantive work, that there isn't a kind of constant small stream of little corrections, because there's always when you know you can change something, it's very tempting to keep looking at it, keep kind of tweaking, keep kind of changing, kind of doing more work. So I think that's perhaps something for us all to kind of keep an eye on. Are there any further questions on the timetable? Okay, I'll be honest, it was about 40 minutes ago that I set out the themes that we were going to cover, and I don't know if I have covered them all or not, but I think I have. Is there any... Personnel, I'm sorry, I knew there was something else. Yes, thank you, personnel. So
it's nice, that we listen to you, Chair.
Yes, someone was paying attention, thank you. So obviously, we do wish Mr. Carzosa all the best at his retirement. So we understand so there'll be so we'll have a new audit partner. We'll expect to see them, I think, at the September committee meeting. Ms. Townsend, I understand you'll be continuing kind of working on the audit, so we'll expect your kind of continued presence, obviously, in the audit and for this committee. Are there any kind of further comments or questions on this, or any approaches that we think as a council we should be taking in response to this? Anybody wants to flag? Great. Well, thank you very much. That was a very long and detailed discussion, but I think it was very productive. Thank you both very much for attending at the meeting today. I don't think there's a decision for us to make on the draft audit plan because it is what it is, but thank you. We've noted it and certainly discussed it in some detail, so thank you for that. We're going to take just a 5-minute comfort break. Just to, yes, because we have been going for quite a while, and then we will return and deal with the remaining items of the agenda. So we will adjourn for 5 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We're resuming this meeting of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. We're at agenda item 7, which is the Treasury Performance Report for 2024-25. This was included in the supplementary pack published just under a week ago for this meeting. I believe Ms. Ahmed to present this report. Oh, Martin's going to present the report. Thank you, Martin. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report just outlining the activity last year from Treasury Management, and it sort of details that our outturn in terms of the income we derive from our investments was higher than we'd forecast in the budget. This was down to the rates we were able to achieve being higher than we'd originally forecast. And again, as outlined in the report, we were expecting the Bank of England to reduce the base rate during the year, which they did, but the rate at which they made those cuts was slower and less frequent than was assumed in the budget. So consequently, the returns we made on our money market funds were higher than originally forecast. Also, the rates we could achieve by placing money deposits with local authorities was higher than we could achieve with banks and building societies. So we've placed a higher proportion of our sort of cash with local authorities, and as was outlined in the report, that brought down the sort of overall weighted sort of risk sort of factor associated with our portfolio, because we've got a higher proportion invested with local authorities rather than banks and building societies. And in terms of borrowing, there was a small increase year on year with PWLB borrowing, and some of that being through for housing delivery, because as we're increasing the number of houses we're just trying to deliver throughout the district, we're needing to borrow more to finance that build spend. So in summary, that's the report was presented, but happy to try and to take any comments or questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Are there any comments or questions on the Treasury Management Report for 24-25? Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the clarification in relation, so we're working on the figures on that table 25 from my question earlier. So the Chair, when we sort of note this recommendation for this report, I think we ought to do it with the revised figures for this table. And have that sort of minuted. The other thing that when I was looking through, probably looking towards Councillor John Williams actually on this one, because I think we were the only two that were at that decision. Cambridge The Click, Cambridge Leisure and ICE. I think there are more words to that company, because it was Click, wasn't it, that it was referred to as. Right now, I'd have thought that the loan would be down a little bit more. I know in the past we've had to sort of do sort of payment breaks for them. I'm just wondering where that's at on the balance. Could be that, are they meeting their requested demands or not? Because my understanding is we gave them, trying to remember what part was on pink papers, it wasn't. It was many, many years ago now, so I'm going to keep this as vague as I possibly can. But there was a part where we would see a bit of a delay once it was opened, then obviously there was pandemic. So I know there has been a lot of variation from the original things that were voted on. So just, are we actually where we expected to be, or has there been another stumbling block on that? I think was the main thing that jumped out at me, Chair.
Thank you. Is that something we can provide an answer to now, or is that something that you would want to update the committee by circulation?
Yeah, I'd need to go back and check on that.
Thank
so I don't
you.
have
Are you happy if we take something reported back to the committee by email, just as to the latest status of the Click investment?
Yes, yeah, I think so. And then as we come forward, maybe not a rag rating as such, but just some sort of commentary. We have the report presented to us of what's returning as we'd intended, what isn't, because I think it's really important when we're making sort of decisions. We haven't needed to recently, but obviously we do things on the basis of forecast yield. Forecasts are what they are a prediction. So it'd be good to see if, not just if something is being profitable, but how it relates to the decision-making process and how it was made, because that then helps us see if there's any variables I think that'd be really helpful. And in the accounts, I did reference about sort of disposal of assets and things like that. I'm just wondering if there are any sort of prospect of any of these things being disposed of in the short term, because with LGR, I know there is a cut-off point when we're not allowed to do things like disposals or make further investments and those sorts of things. So just wondering if we're making provision for that, if there's things we need to do ahead of that cut-off date to make sure that we keep ourselves afloat and in a healthy financial position in that interim period.
Thank you. Any comments on sort of preparedness for LGR from the perspective of our, I guess, particularly our investments, but also to a lesser extent our liabilities?
At this stage, no, but we do meet our Treasury advisors regularly, so that will be in hand as we get closer to that stage.
Chair, if I may be helpful to have sort of a document come to our committee about the LGR impacts, cut-off deadlines, those sorts of things, and how we need to respond from a financial point of view. I think we are taking a big step into the unknown with all this, but the more informed we are, the better decision making we can make.
Thank you. I wonder, perhaps Mr. Tully, you and your team might be able to assist the finance team in. I agree, some kind of briefing to this committee as to, because I know you've obviously put some thought into it in terms of the annual governance statement, etc. But just kind of broadening that out into the kind of practical steps that the authority should and need to be taken. I don't want to drift too much into a kind of scrutiny function, but in terms of the things that this committee particularly looks at, so particularly around investments and audit, in the first instance, that might be a valuable exercise if that's acceptable.
Chair, if I can, the borrowing is a bit, because we have that's because we know that for a quirk in the system, the interest rates have bizarrely, anyone getting a loan and a mortgage would know that the mortgage would be lower, but for some reason our loan or ability to draw down money hasn't worked that way. But that is based on a model of refinancing each year. But there are, when we get further down the LGR, there are cut-offs for when you're allowed to take on new debt. So it's whether the refinancing, because actually if not, then we need to find between now and then an ability to put that on long-term borrowing, or we need to pay it back. We're just worrying as we're going through here, there still seems to be that reliance on refinancing short-term borrowing that just feels like a bit of a potential flag with LGR coming down the road.
Thank you. Can we take that away?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. So one question from me, I guess, just so I can see obviously in this period we've slightly increased our kind of long-term borrowing, so we'll continue to draw down on the PWRB. Are we happy that is still the correct route to go on, given that obviously we do have also kind of investment assets and we're sort of simultaneously loaning out money to other public authorities, and that it still makes sense for us to draw down from the PWB when we're eligible to, rather than sort of self-financing from our own investments? Are we happy with that kind of decision that we're taking?
At this stage, yeah, we are.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on the Treasury Management Report? Thank you all very much. You'll forgive me. I'm without my usual notes. Let me check the. So we've been asked to review the activity and performance, and if satisfied, approve the annual report for this year. Can I take approval by affirmation, please? Thank you very much. That concludes item 7. We move on to item 8. This is in the main pack, the Internal Audit Charter and Code of Ethics. Could I ask Mr. Tully to please present this report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So item 8 is on page 59 of that pack bundle. It's all about new internal audit standards, which has prompted a review of our Charter and Code of Ethics. So probably not the most exciting thing in the world to people outside of the internal audit profession and this committee, but a very important document nonetheless. By way of background, I've tried to cover it on page 60, section 6 of the pack. But new global internal audit standards were issued by the Institute of Internal Auditors, and they went live from January of this year. Now that's a global standard, and as you would expect, it's not one size fits all. So our professional body, CITFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, their role is to interpret the standards and come up with public sector application. And they do that through an application note. So they issued that, and it applies to us from April of this year. So we've been preparing for this as much as we can. Bits of information have been coming out over the past couple of years in anticipation of that. I would say, although they apply from April, we expect to be working on achieving compliance within the first year. We're not expected to be fully compliant within the first year. Now, a lot of the standards are very similar, but there are new things for us to focus on. So we're definitely going to work towards that and getting accredited to the new standards. We're briefly assessed at the top level under the old existing standards, so we've got a good foundation to work from, but there is lots of work to do. Now, the first thing is the Charter, and the good old question, what is the Charter? Well, it's a formal document which describes sort of the role, the authority and the functions of internal audit. So I suppose the who we are, the what we do, and why we're here to do it. Normally, I bring this to the committee at least once per year as good practice, and I think the last version I brought was in September 2024. And the reason I do that is for a couple of reasons. One, it helps demonstrate that we're complying with standards, but more importantly, it's helpful to get the support and endorsement of the committee for our role in the organisation. So the way that we've approached it on this occasion, the Institute of Internal Auditors, they actually produced a template for us to follow. So logically, we use that as a starting point based on their new standards. But what we've done, we've supplemented that with additional public sector requirements and also trying to reflect our own local arrangements. Now, normally, as you know, I like to bring a document back with track changes to you to make it easy to see, but as this is quite a significant shift, I suppose, in terms of the presentation, I haven't been able to do that. So what I've done, I've summarised it in a table in paragraph 14 on page 61. Now, I would say overall the content of the document of the Charter is much the same. And again, where they've made new requirements, we were already doing some of the stuff as good practice anyway. It's mainly the presentation that's different, and with the new standards, there's certainly been a lot of changes in terminology, new language, basically meaning the same thing. So as a team, we've had to get used to that. I think it's fair to say there's going to be a period of reflection over the next 12 months as all these things get embedded, not just amongst ourselves, but amongst colleagues at other sort of organisations. So there may be some further learning. We may make some further adaptations to it. We aim to bring it back to this committee at least once a year, so there'll be plenty of opportunity to keep you briefed on it. So we're working through the new standards, but the recommendation from our professional bodies is to get the Charter approved at the earliest opportunity by our committees, which is this meeting here, and then carry on working on some of the other areas. So that's why we've brought this to you today. The other item is the Code of Ethics. We always bring that along with our Charter because we feel it's a very important document to supplement it and support it. Likewise, it's much the same as the previous version, but updated to reflect changes in terminology. But practically, I would say the documents are the same as before. They've got the same sort of purpose. So I'm happy to take questions on them, but ultimately looking for support and approval of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. Are there any comments or questions on this report or the attached Charter? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking at page 65, which is within the Internal Audit Charter, and in the final bullet point on that page, it speaks about the role of internal audit, including access to the authority's interests in collaborative and arm's length arrangements. I wondered when you were setting your work plans, how much attention and direction you give to our arm's length arrangements and partnerships, things like Ermine Street and the SCIP development, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. So it's an important thing to have in there. It's not something that we'd always need to use, but it's important to make sure we've got that right of access and that sort of expectation. As part of the planning process, we work on a risk basis. So that doesn't automatically mean that there will be pieces of work in that area, and we'll try and take assurance from other parties wherever possible. You know, that's about being effective with our resources, being economic. But if there was something that profiled it higher on the risk register, that would certainly feature in our plan.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. I have no reason to believe that there's something specific that would direct you to looking at these organisations, but the fact that they are quasi-commercial means that they do hold a level of risk, and I would appreciate it if they could be included in the scope of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stopart.
Chair, thank you. Could I ask, what is the timetable for accreditation? Is there any risk around the accreditation process given that timetable? So might be resources or other functions of the council stepping forward to do something. Perhaps I could just leave that one there. I have another question to ask as well.
Thank you. What's the timetable, Mr. Tully?
Although they're live now, as I say, we're not expected to be compliant from day one, but we have an action plan already in place to become fully compliant. One of the things that they can only test us on and give us the full compliance rating is once we've done a lot of work under the new standards. So we could have all the policies and procedures in place on day one, if you like, but they can't see evidence of it in operation. So amount of time needs to elapse. So we've already started to have conversations with basically different people who could provide that assessment. I think we're looking towards the latter part of the year, but the realistic challenge is I think lots of people are going to be asking for assessments at the same time, so that may limit our opportunities about exact dates that we have them in, but that's the sort of timetable we're sort of working towards initially.
You had another point, I think, Mr. Councillor Stopart.
Yeah, thank you. So the kind of ultimate responsible body here is the two audit committees, the City Committee, and sorry, I can't quote the title, and this committee. Having, as it were, two lines of feedback, you're making this perhaps explicit for the first time, but I think this has been the case for, in the recent history of internal audit. Does that pose any issues? Do the two committees kind of converge on most things? It's just a bit of a narrative as to how this works and whether we could do our best to avoid any pitfalls in the future. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, as a shared service, we've had to work with two relevant audit committees, is the term that I use because they go under different names, at each council for a number of years, since sort of 2018 really. And so they do work okay, it works well. Are there any pitfalls? Not immediately. Are there lots of potentially shared learning? Sometimes yes, and we can bring that back to both committees. If something works really well at one committee, we'd obviously share that learning with the other. That's the benefit of a sort of a shared service. But I suppose crucially the point is we both sort of follow the sort of SIPFA standards on what good audit committees are. So we're both working to pretty much the same sort of framework and guidance.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So, sort of leading on from what others have asked, obviously there is a time to sort of embed this and time to take it through the processes. Do we have any idea where things are going to be in relation to 3C services? Because at the moment there's lots of different boundaries. So if the option for sort of South City Hunts goes through, well, that doesn't affect because you are those three councils. But what if it's not that boundary? If it's a different boundary, how is that going to impact on yourselves, and how do we make sure that internal audit isn't something that falls through the gaps on that? That's the first question. The other is it references here about the sort of contact with officers and the governance arrangements and the senior leadership team. One of the things, I'm not sure actually this might be John Murphy's last sort of audit meeting as he starts his new job, but the advert going forward is for 4 days a week. On other areas of the council where it's operating 4 days a week, what you'll have is people have different days to make sure that there is somebody available on those days. We only have one monitoring officer. Now currently, because it's 3C that employs our monitoring officer is working 5 days, not 4. Where is internal audit been sort of consulted as to the risks attached to not having a monitoring officer 1 day a week? or how's that gone about? Because when I read through this as part of it, it very much is about having the right sort of layers of risk and mitigating against it. But that feels like a whopping great big issue. We do need, you know, none of us really, when we wake up, it's partly why I like being a councillor, you don't know where your day is going to go, but that does mean that you can need a monitoring officer at very short notice.
Thank you. Do you have any reflections on those potential changes?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, change is a constant, isn't it? That's the sort of buzzword these days. It's changes is the usual. I mean, you know, certainly, I suppose I'm going to tell you in reverse order. Possibly in terms of the monitoring officer role, you know, I was notified, the management team were notified when there was going to be change, for sure. I mean, there's an amount of risk inherent with anything, isn't there? And I suppose that the controls to manage that risk would be the same as other members of the leadership team. That's probably as far as my comment can go on that, personally. But it will also be something that will need to be, you know, reviewed as any other role. In terms of the change of LGR, yes, definitely, that's something that we're considering and factoring. It's really too early to say at this stage what's going to happen, of course, and it's difficult. You don't want to commit too many resources in any particular area in case it becomes sort of redundant, sort of abortive work, really. But we are certainly, you know, we've got a network of internal auditors across the region, and, you know, we're all very much in contact with each other and thinking that we've got to plan for this in the future, and well, there'll be more detailed work on that, I'm sure. We've got more robust information to work with, but yeah, it's definitely something we're factoring. I'm glad that you're sort of recognising that it's not something we want to see reduced in terms of capacity of the organisation. It's going to be a busy time, I'm sure.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? No? So I think we've been asked to endorse the charter. Let me just check the exact wording at the start of this report. So there's the report. Yes, so we've been asked to approve the supporting charter and code of ethics. We're happy to do so by affirmation. Thank you. So we now move on to the next item. I think we'll be, sticking with Mr. Tully for this as well, for the Ombudsman annual review letter. Oh, sorry. Mr. Membry, I believe you're presenting item 9, the Ombudsman annual review letter for 24-25.
Yes, indeed, Chair. Thank you. This is, as you say, the Ombudsman annual review letter for last year. The appendices gives the letter and the statistics, and the report looks to give some of the contextual information that the committees requested in previous years. Generally, it's a positive letter from the Ombudsman. We've had one case where the Ombudsman found against us. The number that went to the Ombudsman last year were 8 cases, which is a reduction from 11 the previous year, which in itself was a reduction on 24 the year before. One thing I will mention in the contextual information is this is from the local government ombudsman. There is, of course, a separate housing ombudsman, and we don't at the moment, my housing colleagues tell me, get the same sort of letter from the housing ombudsman. So when looking at the resolution rates of 97%, we've also done a quick exercise to exclude the housing complaints to see whether that would make a significant difference. And that would change the resolution rates for this year to 95%. And that's assuming, you know, a worst case scenario. So it doesn't make a significant difference. I think the big learning point from this year is the one case where the Ombudsman did find against us wasn't because we had acted incorrectly, it was because we were slow to respond to the complaint in the first place. So that's something that I think was a really timely reminder. We've gone out to the complaints champions to remind them that it is important to respond promptly, even if the response that you're going to be given isn't necessarily the one that the complainant would hope to get. I'll be happy to do my best to answer any questions that any members might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Membry. Any comments or questions on this? Councillor van der Ven. I'll come to you, Councillor Williams.
Thanks. These may be too tangential, so I'll ask them quickly. My first question is actually for a question from members when we get involved in responding to concerns from our residents. From my own experience, I think there are points at which I should have gone down the route of suggesting the complaints process, which might be a more efficient, quicker way of dealing with things rather than looking through the sort of the maze. And so I think for myself, some kind of periodic clarification about the value of the complaint system and how to find it and how to engage with it. You can use the call center if you don't have access to the internet and all that, but just in general, some reinforcement of that would be helpful. And then second, just a comment, it's not for us, it's for the local government's ombudsman website, just to note, Ms. X, Mr. X, Mrs. X have been very busy. Mr. B and Mrs. B have not been very busy, and Mr. Y has been just a little bit busy. It's just in a very striking use of language in the Ombudsman's reporting on decisions. It's very strange and a bit baffling. So if that feedback is helpful, there it is.
Thank you. Those are some helpful reflections. Councillor Heather Williams, I think you wanted to come in.
Thank you. I must admit, I've always tried to resolve and help residents resolve things before they get to a complaint stage. I see it as, we don't want complaints in for the council. If they are necessary, then that's how they need be. However, it is also sometimes something that sort of goes against the resident, in that I had an issue and they'd put a complaint in and they'd come to me, and then it was like, well, they've got a complaint in, so we can't talk about that now, and we can't discuss that, and we can't do anything until it's gone through its complaints process. So I think there's something for us to do as well, as look at, because all that is red rag to a bull. Now you've complained because you're really unhappy about something. Now we're not going to help you because there's a complaint in and that process got to go through first. That doesn't help us have a happy end user. So that the complaints can be a bit of a double-edged sword. Concentrating on the Ombudsman letter, obviously it has reference in relation to planning enforcement, and it is frustrating in that if the decision was correct, that feels like it's completely avoidable. It's the lack of communication or the delay in communication. Now, also sit on planning committee, where we can see the sort of figures and the volume of cases that planning enforcement officers currently have. I'm just wondering, Mr. Membry can allude to which KPI that the council has that planning enforcement would be covered by. Because if you just do it on rough numbers, Chair, you're potentially looking at 100 cases for that planning enforcement officer to be dealing with. So when you get to that sort of volume, it's not a surprise that they may take time to respond and that we get those delays. So just wondering what work has been done to review the planning enforcement team, whether they have enough resource to be able to respond and comply quick enough, because this feels like it's been a bit of an own goal, in that the officers did the right thing, they came to the right conclusion, but it wasn't done quick enough. But that could be because that area is not getting resourced. So which KPI should we be looking at in relation to this? I think would be the first instance. And also, planning committee was yesterday. I had another meeting and had to make childcare arrangements yesterday, so Councillor Ellington's substituted for me, but I have had a quick look back. When it comes to the planning enforcement section, there's been a complete change in how it's been reported from when I first became a councillor. Fine. But we're now at a situation where questions of planning enforcement is almost actively discouraged in that meeting, and I believe there has been a complaint made by one of my colleagues accordingly. But that's very concerning that at the same time that we have this, Chair, this Ombudsman letter that comes through flagging this as an issue, then councillors are being discouraged or actively deterred from asking questions in that service area. So I'm wondering whether there is a need to communicate this letter throughout the organisation to the other departments, so then it will be very clear that it is reasonable for councillors to be asking questions in relation to these areas when there has been the finding that there has been.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Mr. Membry, would you like to comment on the on how this should be interpreted through the kind of KPIs around planning enforcement, and also perhaps the kind of the circulation of this Ombudsman's report?
Yeah, certainly in terms of the circulation of the Ombudsman's report, indeed, that this will be disseminated throughout the council through a mechanism that we call CMT, a corporate management team, so that the learnings can be addressed there. In terms of the planning KPIs, I'm afraid, I don't have a eidetic memory, but I don't recall there being a KPI specifically around planning enforcement. But obviously I'm not from the planning service, so I'll ask my planning colleagues and get a response.
Thank you. Sorry, did you want to come back on that?
I would be inclined to agree that perhaps that KPI is missing, and that perhaps it would be prudent to make sure this is shared with the scrutiny committee. I know KPIs have just been looked at, and we've had lots of reports around KPIs and performance, but this is definitely an area of our council that they are struggling. I think they're struggling due to lack of resource. When you look at their case numbers, that is my view, Chair. And I hope we have a cabinet member listening who's going to be setting the budget, that they're listening to this very clearly, and that we see more resource in this area, because here the issue wasn't what they decided, it was the delay. And that delay becomes from under-resourcing, in my view, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Chair. Just to chime in and support Councillor Williams' comments. Breakdown of complaints received by service areas in the covering paper for the Ombudsman report is planning 19. That's significantly a smaller number than enforcement complaints, which are probably in 3 figures. So there is a mismatch between what's being reported in one area versus what's in front of us here. I think that's what one of the things you were trying to highlight.
I think we're trying to highlight that KPIs might not be in the right areas in relation to planning when we look at this report. But like you say, it's not, there is a complete disconnect here between what we're seeing in sort of KPI land and the reality.
Yeah. Thank you both. Any further comments or questions on this report? No, we've been asked to review the letters, statistics, and make any comments as required, which we have done so. Thank you very much, Mr. Membry. We now move to the last substantive item, item 10, the governance risk and control update as part of the supplemental pack. I believe we're back to Mr. Tully for this one, if you would be so kind as to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is our quarterly update on topical issues of governance, risk and control, opportunity to provide the committee with interesting updates and progress on various matters. So we're on page 137 of the packs. We're starting on with the finance accountancy update on page 140. As we discussed earlier today and at previous committee meetings, colleagues at KPMG made a number of recommendations to help strengthen the control environment. And as committee, we agreed that we wanted to monitor these actions to keep track of their progress. So we provided an update in the quarterly pack for you. So updates listed below in the table on the page. In summary, 6 of the 13 actions have been completed and 7 are in progress. We'll probably bring back another progress update at a later stage, but just for comfort and assurance that they are in progress. Moving on to page 143, we've got an internal audit update, and in that section, in terms of the audit reviews completed, just to highlight that we've done a follow-up review of the capital fixed asset register. We've spoken about this, I suppose, in various forms already. Basically, they've still got to complete all of the actions, but we've seen they've made very good positive progress, which is good. We're going to complete a further follow-up, and this is all linked in to the actions above, because KPMG mentioned it in their report as well. I think it was action number 6. So good progress, but we'll come back for another return visit there until they're concluded. Moving on to page 144, we've got an item talking about register of interests, declarations of interests. At the previous meeting, members asked the monitoring officer to provide some information about the process. Internal audit, we were doing some work in this area as well, so it made good sense to sort of work together on this, and so we can provide an update in this report. Probably a few just key points to note. The process has been promoted, as you can see in the report, which is good, and as a consequence, we can see regular declarations being made. That's very positive to be able to report that. John, our monitoring officer, who's up on the screen, has compared practice to other councils, and that's provided assurance that our approach is consistent with what other people are doing. To help supplement the controls work, we've done some testing of data. Data is uploaded to the Cabinet Office National Fraud Initiative, and that provides potential matches records to investigate. We've looked at those that have come back and there's no concerns arising, so that's positive. And also we've done a follow-up piece of work because we did this as an audit a year or so ago, and good progress is being made there in implementing the actions that we recommended. Certainly 5 are completed and 1's due to be completed this quarter. So we'll conclude that and summarise that in our next report to the committee. But as an interim report, it makes sense to capture that at this time as well. So positive steps. On page 145, we highlight the new internal audit standards. First output is the charter, which we had just on the agenda earlier. It's also worth highlighting the same page, team resources, because this is something where the committee is interested about the capacity of the internal audit team. I highlighted before at a previous meeting we were going through transformation. As part of that, we've got approval to introduce 2 new apprenticeship roles in place, and the apprenticeship scheme is being reviewed at the moment. It should hopefully be finalised very soon, and once that is, we will kickstart our recruitment process to get people on board, and that's going to be good. It's going to help provide service continuity within the team for the future. So that's looking forward to doing that. And then just towards the end of the report, the usual two updates. We've got the counter fraud updates and statistics starting on page 114, which I hope you find useful, and then Bruce just got topical items of interest at the end with links to useful articles and reference to help develop your skills and knowledge. So that's all I've got, but happy to take questions or comments.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this? I'll go to Councillor Leeming and then I'll come to you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. On page 147, I'm just looking at the section that relates to the RIPA powers. At this point in this report, it says that there have been no cases where the RIPA powers have been used, and this is the period January to March, I assume. We recently underwent RIPA training, and an officer mentioned that there has recently been a RIPA, there's been use of the RIPA powers. I'm just wondering whether it's because that's happened post 31st of March, or if it's an error in the statistics.
Thank you, yes. In the first answer, I'm not aware of any RIPA cases being concluded or put in place at this stage. With regard to the timing, that could possibly be a factor. In the fraud statistics we've gotten there for up to the end of the year, they're Q4, so that's going up towards 31st of March. So I'll definitely double check in with all colleagues just to make sure that is accurate, but I'm certainly not aware of any in this period.
Thank you. Can we, perhaps, Mr. Murphy, do you have anything to add just on that point?
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't. In fairness, Mr. Tully and I have been in communication as this meeting has progressed on that matter, but no, we don't have any further information at this stage.
Thank you. Was there anything else, Councillor, that you wanted to raise? Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams, please.
Thank you. It was just in here reference in relation to training, development and risk insight. Appreciate that's sort of gone more on the fraud side. But one of the things that we've discussed in the past is sort of CPD and ensuring that if people are employed on the basis that they have a qualification, actually checking that they still have that qualification and they're keeping up to date with things. And training is something that the 4-day week is identified as a bit of a risk that people then don't have the time to do. So just wondering how that would fit into sort of governance risk, and is that, appreciate you did some work at the time, but is that ongoing? You know, how do we make sure that people are doing enough CPD to help us then as councillors make informed decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I see lots of evidence, although I'm not even a South Council employee, but lots of evidence of training initiatives going on at the council, certainly being promoted widely. I'm, on the face of it, I'm quite confident there is lots of training opportunities going on. I mean, I speak to people, I know they're doing various things like apprenticeships and mentoring and training. It's something I'll have to take away and have another further conversation with colleagues about, just for more assurance. But yeah, I do witness lots of training.
Thank you, Chair. If I could say, because there's a difference between training opportunities and uptake. So it's not about the council not providing it, but we as councillors know that there are some sessions, councillor training provided, member development programmes is very good, but out of 45 councillors, sometimes there's only 3 or 4 of us on the call. So it's all respective, not actually to what's offered, but to the uptake. And obviously there are some things that can't be done in-house if people's professional qualifications are reliant upon it. I think that was one of the risks we looked at previously, and we sort of not revised it for a while. I think it is something that's worth, people are paid a certain pay scale as well based on them having said qualification. We need to ensure that they still have it and have it in place to ensure good governance.
Thank you. Take that away. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Just one from me, if I may. Just on page 140, the control account reconciliations. I wondered if there was anything more we could say in the update to those, because I think for the other high priority actions, it's quite clear what the next step is going to be in terms of resolving those. Whereas for the control account reconciliations, which I know is something that this committee has highlighted as a particular concern in the past, there isn't a kind of more detailed kind of update. So I don't know whether yourself or Ms. Ahmed want to provide, can expand that at all on this occasion, or whether that's something you want to bring to the next meeting. But I think I would appreciate a little more on that if possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the control reconciliations, obviously the reason that they're work in progress is because although we have updated some, I didn't feel it was appropriate to say completed when not all might be sort of in that process of being signed off. We do know with the bank reconciliation that is being signed off regularly by someone else as part of the review. So that's why that's in progress, and the idea is now that we have the audit happening over the summer and the capacity to move work around, we're ensuring that training happens and that everybody who is responsible for reconciliation is doing the same thing, where we have a cover sheet and then it's reviewed and signed off. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's exactly the sort of thing I was hoping for. Thank you. Any more comments or questions before I close this item? So I think we've been asked to note and comment, which we have done so. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Tully. Final item on the agenda is matters of topical interest. It's an opportunity to raise any issues that have not otherwise come up during the meeting. I'll go to Councillor Stobart first.
Chair, thank you. So it's a quite broad question. Increasingly, the topic of social value has come up in certain training sessions, but also in committees. So when we looked, for example, at the mobile warden scheme, we were quite careful to look at the social value of services delivered. Now, I'm wondering, let me just give another example, which is in the sustainability space. So when we are thinking, for example, about the value of green space, that touches on, of course, amenity, but amenity relates to education and mental health and so on. So the social value in quite a lot of what we're doing, and I suppose I'm a little concerned that these discrete mentions aren't, in a sense, connected. And there is a common currency, there's something called the social value engine, by which you can calculate social value. Is this committee interested in social value to the extent of regularising its application and perhaps the tools that we're using when we talk about social value? Because there's a possibility for us to be very broad in the way we talk about it and be therefore imprecise and not serve each other and our residents well. So is there some value in spending some time and trying to regularise the use of the term because it is well defined and the procedures around it.
Thank you. You raise an interesting topic that I think should be kind of considered carefully by the committee. I think that part of this will be for, I think, scrutiny and overview to consider as well when they're kind of assessing the kind of activity of the council as a kind of measure against that. But whether there's a role for us to ensure that it's accurately captured, I'm thinking particularly around things like the annual governance statement and potentially also in our work kind of reviewing the kind of the risk register and the kind of key performance indicators. I agree it's probably mentioned sporadically there and not kind of terribly consistently, and there isn't maybe the detailed understanding there needs to be. I might take that away and kind of consider with officers how we can best kind of embed that in a consistent way across what we're looking at, which I think is kind of is at the heart of what you're asking for, if I've understood. No, thank you for raising it, and we will consider how we can bring that in. Thank you. Any more for any more? Thank you. So that concludes the business of today. The date of the next meeting, does anyone have to hand? Apologies.
It is on the wrong page.
The date of the next meeting is the 25th of September at 10 o'clock. So I look forward to seeing you there, and I close the meeting at 12:40. Thank you very much, everyone.